Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Mirabili, the founder of Springboard Futures, and we're here with you today to have a webinar called um, Moving Forward, Looking Back. The reason that we decided to create the webinar, the series actually, was as a result of what we were seeing sort of out in the public, in the different places that we shop, and the places that at the time we were still able to eat. And what we were seeing was that people were really leaning into comfort. They were leaning into comfort foods. You would see shopping carts that were filled with dry goods and canned goods, and right on top of them was an Entenmann's cake or something that was really just comfort food, something that, I mean, I had my box of Lucky Charms, so I was certainly no exception. But it raised a question for us about the essential nature of moving forward and what role some of these fundamental attributes of our sociability really are going to have. So when we think of moving forward, that idea of comfort, wellness, relationships with partners, family, and friends, all of those things have seen some pretty distinct changes during this period. Whether it's social distancing or not being able to go out to restaurants, having to spend time at home with people that we love and wondering if we still love them. But all of that sort of running through these like intense situations. So what I wanted to do was to bring you three people who I just love as experts and as people that I feel can bring us some information on what we can expect going forward. The first of those is Patty Carpenter. Patty Carpenter is a winning designer and a creative director. She's the principal of Carpenter & Company and is the global trend ambassador for Maison Objet for Paris and America. And she is also a consultant for Pantone. Hi, Patty.
Hey, Tom, it's great to be with you all. I'm looking forward to this lively, creative conversation.
Yeah, me too. The second is Michelle Lamb. Michelle Lamb is co-founder of the Trend Curve, which most of you I'm sure know, a trend forecasting company that's about to celebrate its 33rd anniversary. How does she do it? She started at 4 years old, that's how. So she also consults for companies from startups to Fortune 50 companies, and she helps strategize business and strategize assortments. So thank you, Michelle, for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. This is going to be fun.
It's a pleasure. And finally, somebody that's really new to the fold for us, and that is Leanne Schwarzkopf. She's certainly not new to the industry. She's a co-founder of Project Partners Network. She specializes in licensing and innovation, and she's worked with companies, again, from small startup companies up to the Fortune 50. Some of these are household names from in every category, through every channel. So she's really diverse, got a great breadth of knowledge, and we wanted to bring her in because we feel there's a lot of cross-channel opportunities here. So welcome, Leanne.
Hi, thanks for including me. I'm honored to be on your panel.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So I'm just going to sort of jump right in. I think that one of the things, I'm going to start with you, Michelle. I think that one of the things that we are looking at is, it's such an emotional issue, all of this, for all of us. So how do you think, and right now stores are wrapping up seasonal, or they're just placing their seasonal buys. How do you think that all of this emotional rawness, and these new standards for comfort, how is that going to affect seasonal businesses? What can we expect with, with Halloween, with autumn, Thanksgiving, with Christmas? What we're going to see going forward?
Well, decor choices are always driven by emotions, but I have to say that in all the years that I've been forecasting trend, I have only once before seen emotions so raw, and of course that was in the fall of 2001. Today there's a lot of emotions swirling around trust because we can't even trust the air that we breathe. Trust is on our mind with every single breath. So as we go forward for these assortments, whether they're seasonal or everyday, trust is going to be crucial. So how to establish that? I think that one way to do that is to look at things that have already stood the test of time. So it doesn't mean we repeat things exactly, that wouldn't really work for trend, but it does mean that we use some of those things as anchors. Here's an example. There's a Christmas theme out there called Letters to Santa. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we saw, it's been around for at least 100 years. It was viable in the 20s and 30s. Most recently, it was around in 2011. And I think the time is right for it to come back again. Why is that? It's it's because the idea of a simple wish, having a simple wish granted, is something that's really compelling for consumers today. But I don't believe that we'll see so much of the naive scribblings of kids writing their letters to Santa. I think this goes up a notch for age. I think this is about adults. I think we're going to see wishes for gin cocktails, not hot cocoa, and mani-pedis, not toys.
Oh my God. See, I was thinking world peace and you actually had me like welling up, but now we're just going into gin cocktails so much better with it.
So you're there, right?
Yeah,
On
I'm
the
there.
gin cocktails.
So that's terrific. Well, what about Halloween? Like, what's that going to look like this year?
Well, for Halloween, I think we will also be looking at some themes that we know from the past. But if we're talking about little kids, nothing really so scary.
Mm.
For adults, we can maybe travel into some things that are a little gorier, a little bloodier for Halloween. But things that we know, things that have their roots in the past, will definitely be on our minds, not just this year. This isn't something that we're going to be over in 6 months or 12 months. This is going to go on at least through 2021 and maybe into 2022.
Right. Yeah, no, that I think you're absolutely right. And I love the idea of having something that's familiar, but it's updated. We're not just raking back the past. We're saying, you know, I love the idea of taking the letters to Santa up an age group. It's really, really interesting to see, like, to have parents involved, and you can see new traditions evolving around that theme. I love it. I just absolutely love
I think we're establishing new traditions right now.
Mm-hmm.
So as we approach each one of the seasonal holidays, we'll start layering in those new behaviors and new traditions.
Yeah, I think it's hard to believe that down the road we're going to be looking at these days in a very nostalgic way. I feel it already. I feel myself referencing in my head, I'm going to miss this next year, being here with Bill all day, or, you know, whatever. So it's I think already I can see the beginnings of something positive out of it. So I'm going to jump over to Leanne really quick, because Leanne, we've talked about a lot of trends sort of jumping across the barrier of channels. You know, for example, trends that start in home and now all of a sudden we're seeing them come to life in grocery or in drug channel. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Do you see that people are you know, do you see trends like this, for example, comfort affecting the things that people put in their cart in grocery, for example?
Yeah, I've been watching, like, excuse me, like everyone else, the items that are out of stock, and certainly some of it is head scratching. But other items that are out of stock are very interesting, and in my mind speak not only to the current crisis, but some pretty big changes going forward. Cooking would be one example. You see classes for kids and adults, everything from basic home ec to, you know, Food Network superstars, all putting content together. I'm hearing shortages of eggs and yeast. My own social media and email inbox are full of people saying, look what I did, isn't this great? I'm so proud of myself. This all builds on the DIY trend that we've been watching for a while, and I think it's going to have a really positive effect on housewares going forward. I think some of the fear of failure will go away, and I think people will become more engaged in the kitchen. I think when people are ready to do less social distancing, they're going to do it in smaller groups and perhaps entertain at home more. I actually was so intrigued by that idea. I spoke with a family therapist on that topic, and she said, you know, families might re-engage with other families first. They'll look to groups where their kids share interests. Think about this, the soccer carpool. So the kids will ease back into playing, the parents will ease back into socializing, and then those people that don't have kids will bring their close circle of friends and celebrate their newfound freedom, and then they're showcasing their newfound skills.
Now you had a phrase that I want you to share with us. We were talking about you have to share that with us. Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, the context of the conversation yesterday was we were talking about stress baking and all that you're reading about that and how therapeutic it is. And I think that's going to evolve into one of my personal favorite words and personal favorite activities. It's procrastinating. And that's where you can't start the project until you whip up that pan of brownies or start those chocolate chip cookies. It's only going to take a couple of minutes, and then 45 minutes to an hour later, you're still doing something. And the project becomes much more interesting. But I think our shopping habits are going to reflect some of those behaviors going forward. And I think that's really going to spill into housewares, in food channels. I think it's going to spill into other channels too. I think increased confidence in DIY will bring people into the crafting channel, bring them into the housewares channel, etc.
Outstanding. So I'm going to jump over to Patty now. Patty, it's probably the most intimidating question because I've been asked this and I always like falter on it. But color is the most, color's the most important probably thing that we all look for because it spreads so quickly across categories. It is so easy, I think, to be wrong. So, but I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're probably you're a culture vulture when it comes to color. Every time I call you, every time we speak, you're coming from something else. The Smithsonian, the Cooper Hewitt did something on color. It's like, okay. So, so I want to ask you, when you look across the landscape of all these experts and your own opinion included, where's color going? What is going to be the effect of this on color? Is there nostalgia in that too? Or, what are we seeing?
Oh, absolutely. I think nostalgia is going to be very good and very strong. We're going to have that need. At this point, it's for some of us, it's quite terrifying being right here in New York in the eye of the storm. There are people who are really, really suffering with how do we navigate this unprecedented time. But it's also going to be quite transformative at the same time. We can't all help but be touched by what's happening. And so this whole idea of, sometimes for me, I find that disruption is actually what's necessary in order to evolve. And as we look at it from the point of view of color, what I'm seeing a lot of is that we've been talking about a lot of these types of things for quite some time, but now we're going to see different parts of those trends take on deeper meaning, and some are going to recede in importance. And what I've been really talking about a great deal is the re's. We've been talking about the whole idea of we're going to rethink, we're going to refocus, we're going to reflect, we're going to recharge, we're going to reboot. And then at the end of all of that, we need to restore, because we do need to get back to business. All of us need to come out of our houses and we need to get back to business. So we're starting to see things that really are moving forward, like that bold, optimistic color we've been talking about, that sense of that joy of the jolt of the joyful, that sense of, lifting our spirits because we really need that. We're also talking about the warmer side of the palette that we've been talking about for some time now, bringing that cozy kind of comfort that we need. It's now needed more than ever. And so we see these warmed, beautiful pinks that have a yellow cast sort of coraled undertone. And so sometimes they're nuanced and sometimes they flare more pink, sometimes they flare more coral, but that sense of that warmth of that coral color, we really do see coming through very strongly. We're also seeing that nuanced group of neutrals where it's more color in neutrals. With the main neutrals coming to the fore being the brown range, which we've been talking about, from sand to soil. So those really sort of nature infused type of colors. And then certainly the importance of that range of greens, those vegetal and herbal greens really taking their cues from nature, are really going to ground us now more than ever. But then you pair those back to those blues. Pantone had blue as the color of the year. And what we really are looking at now is those mid-range blues, where we're really talking about the fact that blue calls up for us that sense of comfort, that sense of trust, that sense of grounding. You think of the blue sky over us all the time, and then those watery blues that are going to come along with it that flare towards the teals, towards the turquoises, and then balancing those off against things that are going to give us some jolts are the metallics. We're seeing lots of colored metallics come to the fore, where you really get that sense of almost a neon kind of a take on a red or a blue, or a particular range of mid-green that has kind of a digital, if you will, kind of.
Where's gold going to go in all this? Because when you and I were in Paris, we saw a lot of gold, and a lot of really bright gold, and both of us were like, God, I thought this was over. But if it's not, is that going to continue? Is that going to seem too like blingy and too luxe for right now? Are we going to see more burnished, patinated, satin finish? So where's that going to go?
Well, for me, I see a couple of things happening. I agree with you. We saw way too much on the shiny side of gold when we were in Paris. I don't think that's going to come, and I didn't think it was going to come here strongly, and I think even less now. But I do think we're going to want a touch of those metallics, because they're going to resonate with us for that glimpse or that sliver that adds light and luster to whatever we're doing. So I think we will have more of the patinaed and the brushed kinds of golds and brasses continuing. And then there will be some of those silvers that come through as well. well. And certainly there is a little bit of that trend towards maximalism that's going to really take
that's
off.
always going to be like a part of the.
Those of us who
I mean, it's really comforting.
going to dress up when we go out now, you know, it's going to be want to put some clothes on, and we're going to want to put on the adornment that goes with that. And so I think we will see some of that happening with home in the same way, where we want those little touches around because they reflect light. They do, again, they lift our spirits. It's that whole idea of light play, you know, and what's going on there. So I do think that we will have those metallics have some importance in certain areas.
I think that what's great in what you're saying is these are directions we were headed in anyway. We saw the greens were becoming more important. So it seems like the velocity is moving. You're amping up the velocity because of what's happened with Corona and our experience in that. But we're not going off in any sort of like veering left or veering right in any direction. It's just a faster build with certain things, and things that like plums and things like that were sort of on the periphery. We're seeing them like we're not even talking about that right now.
Well, I think there might be a certain level of the purples, that lavender range. We were calling it the tints and the tinges at one point. I do see some of that being important because it does have a digital connection as well, and it plays back sometimes to making the softer, soothing pastels have more life and make them look refreshed.
It just feels great that there's nothing super unexpected. It's just the velocity, the speed of things has moved up, but you know, we were in the right direction. We're not having to make major assortment changes.
I would agree with that completely.
So Michelle, I'm going to jump back to you for a second. It's, you know, because of what's happening this year, at least, you know, family and friends aren't going to be able to gather together for Easter or Passover this year. You know, that's going to have, you know, an effect on all of us. But how will that affect seasonal decor going forward? Is there going to be an echo of that next year? You know, and how do you even see people dealing with it this year? You know, what are they doing? Because we're not going to not celebrate. So what should we be doing?
Exactly. It's important to know that the holidays are not dead at all. In fact, we're hearing some really optimistic reports about Easter this year. And that may be because a lot of the Easter business is done in grocery and drugstores, and those channels are alive and well. It's where all of us are going. It's the only place that we're going. So we're hearing that there are sales here, and we're also hearing, in fact, Leanne and I were talking about this just a day or so ago, that things as simple as decorating eggs, that's really traditional. So that feeds into what you were talking about before, Tom, about nostalgia. That's there, but at the same time, it gives kids some crafts to do. It keeps them busy, it keeps them creative. And so all of that is important. Remember, the holidays are not going away. And in fact, I think that through the end of this year, and again, a knock-on effect into at least the next year and maybe into 2022, we're going to see seasonal decorating becoming even more important, meaning even more than it has in the past. And I feel this way in particular about Halloween. You know, you think about how kids have already started gravitating toward going to shopping malls, having parties, even trunk or treating environments that their parents feel
What's trunk or treating? I hate to seem like an idiot, but what is trunk or treating?
Well, you go to a parking lot in your car and you open up the trunk where you have treats, and the kids in costume parade from trunk to trunk to trunk.
God, I love that.
Yes.
I love that.
So it's not new, and it's been gaining for a number of years, but
Patty, we got to get out of the city more. I love that.
Even though those kinds of things seem sort of benign, they may be too risky for parents going forward. So I think we're going to see a lot more of gathering at home. I loved what Leanne was talking about with gathering with the families you know best, first of all. But yes, I think we will absolutely have more at home, and that puts a spotlight on decorations. I think it also puts a spotlight on baking. I think kids will be doing baking with their parents. I think adults will be doing baking on their own. Don't forget that there's a fairly significant percentage of millennials who like Halloween better than they like Christmas. So they'll be doing their parties, but with a more curated guest list. than before. So again, the decor will be just as curated as the guest list, and kids will be doing their baking. And as I said before, silly themes, fun themes, very sweet themes for them. But for the adults, I think we can do Gothic Gloom. I like that one. We can do Psychic Salon.
You just finished the trend report, right? You just finished it, because I believe that we're going to be promoting it on Springboard, but you have did you release it yet? Are you releasing it now?
Yes, one is already released. I'll have another that I'm releasing actually as a webinar within the next 2 weeks. So if anybody's interested in that, they can just ping you or ping me. And
Go ahead, give it a little plug. Give your site address. I don't mind.
Trendcurve.com. That's
Excellent.
it. But before we leave this topic, I just want to say one other thing. I think there's a motif that's going to be the scariest motif of all this year, next year too. I think it's the bat. And whether you feel like the bat got a bum rap out of this whole COVID-19 thing or not, it doesn't matter. It's still going to be there. So get your bats ready.
Well, ironically, bats are a symbol of longevity. So it's
not this week.
Yeah, no, not so much. But they're so I think that let me just move back over to Leanne for a minute, because we are we're moving through the time so fast. But Leanne, we had you had talked about people nesting and self-quarantining and social distancing in our in our sort of daily lives. What is that doing to the types of products that, I mean, a friend of mine was having a meeting with L'Oreal Paris last week, or in Paris, and what he came back with was, okay, increased concentration on eye products, face products, because we're being seen more on screen, and that's the upshot about that. But what are we seeing in other categories, be it food or anything else that we need to know in gifts and home, and that may translate over to that?
One of the things I think we're going to see is related to an area that I practiced in, is licensing. And I think a lot of the brands that you're used to seeing on shelf and in the media and whatever are really providing consumers with that reassurance that they want and that they're looking for in brands. And I think a lot of the companies are really stepping up to the plate, and I can think consumers are going to remember that. I read somewhere, I think YPulse, that nearly 90% of the consumers are expecting brands and companies to help during a crisis. And I really think we're seeing that now. And in the licensing area in particular, I think studios, artists, authors, they're all are providing content. Manufacturers are realigning, whether it's toy companies or cosmetics. And I think consumers will remember that, and that's going to bring them into new categories and new relationships with brands and products across a variety of channels. I think authenticity is really important, whether it's the efforts that the retailers, the manufacturers are making. And I think that's going to also have an impact on licensed products and other products that we see going forward. They'll have to have a reason for being. They'll have to fit in with, with the trends that are happening, whether it's color, as Patty talked about, or themes that Michelle talked about, but consumers are looking for ways to put the puzzles together.
Right.
And I think their minds will be broadened as they get back out into retail and get back out with people. And I think that's going to bring us a little.
Let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. So if we have licenses, like if licenses aren't a part of your assortment already, what you're saying is make them a part of your assortment, or that there's a halo effect of licenses
exactly
on other products.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying it. There is a halo effect with licensed products, and I'm not advocating everybody run out and switch over your assortment to licensing, but I think it should be something that you consider in your mix going forward, whether you're a manufacturer or a retailer. It's like, where can you benefit from what the activities are that these companies have been doing, and how can you get farther faster? How can you re-engage in business and reignite the passion that consumers have with your product? And sometimes it's through relationship.
I mean, licenses still, they're the comfort food product, right? Like
they are. And I think sometimes people think licensing and they immediately go to an entertainment property, but we're seeing when you look at the space that huge upticks in brands that are around puzzles and games and toys and reading publishing properties are going through the moon. And when parents are spending all this quality time, I use the word quality in quotes sometimes. There's a lot of memes going around about that the homeschooling benefits. But I think there's going to be something very visceral with the brands that help you engage with your family and your friends in that way.
Let me just make an aside here real quick. We see, I do see people raising their hands, and we're going to give you a chance to talk. We're going to sort of try to, hit a spot at the end. We just have to get more points, and I promise we'll take your questions. As scary as that always is to me, because I'm always afraid somebody's going to ask a question I can't answer. Okay, so let's get back to Patty for a second. So Patty, you've addressed the color thing. I think that I'm going to ask you to get a little bit off product and a little bit more emotional, only because with color, you guys always seem to you're like the Barbara Walters of the trend world. You're always going for the cry, so it's like, and you have this, I don't know. I think that when people talk about color, they talk about emotion, they talk about how, it's like, we need to do this. So what's the overall sentiment we're hearing now inside color circles? Is it heal? Is it excite? What is it? And what are some of the things
there's several that I'm hearing as I sort of engage with my community. There's some that are talking about using this time, this fear that we're all kind of sitting inside, as fuel for the next level. Definitely everyone is talking about the idea of nostalgia, those touchstone kinds of things that we're going to need in order to heal as a human family. I personally have been very surprised and delighted by a lot of the things that friends and family have been doing to get through this. And I think those connections that we're making, even though they're virtual often and digital, that those kinds of connections certainly aren't just going to fade away when we're able to go back outside. So this whole idea of even how we're using Zoom, this whole idea of using it to have a DJ party, using it to sing, to dance, to joke, to do all of these things that we've been doing. More TikTok than I've ever seen, great memes, all of those things. So that connection that way is going to be important. We have just kind of reconnected in some ways to our communities that we had, and those communities have often also broadened. So they're not just our family and our friends, but now because we can only do work this way, we really have a new family of work, those people that we are with every day that way. We all, those people that share our vocation, even with us today, that whole idea, this freedom that we're going to have, that we're going to feel when we are able to go outside, is going to give us this ability to grow.
It's interesting. Two things that you said that I have to comment on. One is the whole thing about TikTok and memes, and it's really interesting. Usually in tragic situations or in situations that have so much potential for just devastation, and we got new figures today that didn't make it any better, certainly, but this is different for me because we've jumped into humor well before, there was this whole, with 9/11, it was like comedians would say too soon. And now we need that comfort of being able to laugh right away. Have you guys all noticed that?
You have to laugh. Laughter is the best medicine. I think for me, it's been the crux of it, and doing things that you might not normally do. This past weekend, a group of us, to your point of being a culture vulture, took a virtual tour of Versailles. 4 of us in different places sitting on our computers.
Tell me about that.
Those kinds of things. One of the others is that we're seeing more and more people recreate, modern masters themselves at home. I think those kinds of things are going to continue, and it engages your kids, it engages your family, in culture and art, even if you're not able to be out in it. So yeah, absolutely. I think this is calling on us to be better, and dare I say it, to be best.
I don't know what the rules are, but I'm sure that there's some etiquette rules about plugging your own site, but I don't really know the rules, so I can't be breaking them. But Patty works with Springboard, and so one of the things that she's going to be doing for us is telling us some of the tours that she's taking, some of the virtual life that she's living as we go through this. Because as we talk every day, I'm like, I want to go to Versailles. Why didn't you invite me? Why didn't you? But so we'll we'll move forward with that. But I think that it's just interesting to see how we've been so quick. It seems like in prior years we've been just very slow to kind of come out of it. We're peeking out of it, but here we're like hitting it head on, and I really like that. Leanne, are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I think we were headed that way. I think you saw a lot more edgy humor, whether it was novelty socks or mugs that say things like "I'm silently correcting your grammar." or even crossing a line.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Or even crossing a line into something that might be a little off color or something like that. I think we were headed in that direction. I think that the comic relief, as you said, is necessary. And I think people aren't, they're not crossing the line, and they're not joking about the devastation that is happening, but they're doing other things that can help or release some stress and relieve some of the pressure of your day-to-day life.
I think one of the things that I love about this, and this is the other thing Patty hit on, is like Michelle and I talk, and Patty and I talk, and you and I have talked, but it's like right now we've just said, people need to hear some of the things that are going on out there, and it's we would never have come together. It would have taken 4 months to get us all together and make some sort of something. And it was just like, fuck this. We're just all going to get together, and we're going to say what, we're going to tell people what we think can help. So with that in mind, I'm going to go back to you for a second, Leanne, and just say wellness. Okay, so wellness has obviously come into the spotlight, right? And it was in the spotlight to begin with, but now, straight to the top. So how is that going to really show up in multiple channels, or what's going to happen to that trend? What are you hearing, because you're in with so many of the big people first, what's moving forward in wellness? What's taking a back seat? Maybe what can we expect out of that industry?
Well, I think the clean label and all that kind of stuff is still going to have an impact on the food side. I think.
So transparency, you mean?
Transparency and ingredients and stuff like that. But there's for every trend, there's a counter trend, as Michelle often says. And at the same time, you're also seeing an increased desire for convenience. And so I know some of the big food companies are seeing tremendous sales, like in cereal and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I think the whole wellness, but I think people will be looking at labels again and trying to figure out where they can find that happy medium. I think the other channels that'll see that will be everything from the cosmetics you use and the clothes you use and where it's sourced and whether there's that authenticity that I spoke about before is available. But they'll also be looking at how can I make it myself? Where did it come from? So I think the wellness is going to be, there's going to be a spiritual kind of piece to it, but there'll also be a very practical piece to it. And I can't speak to the spiritual piece as much as I can to the practical.
Well, I'm gonna ask Michelle, because you always have an answer for everything. Kind of unplanned question. So what's gonna happen with us in terms of I know this is awful, but I have to admit it. I go around these days, I'm just thinking like chest up, So what does that mean for you? Like, what is it, the way that you're communicating now, the way that we're all communicating, what is that going to change permanently? Or do you think that's going to just be like, okay, we're going to go back to face and, or will digital communication just never be the same?
I've really been thinking about that because our son works in an industry that is highly secretive. And even that industry has had to send equipment out for people to work at home. Those of us who aren't our son, he came home during this crisis, we had to sign NDAs to keep everything private. Now, I suspect that people are on a learning curve and companies are on a learning curve, and they're going to figure out that we don't need as much personal contact and we don't all need to be clustered together in buildings or some other site as we thought we did. But for us, for our sense of humanity, I want to be clustered with people. I long for my friends. I long to be able to reach out and give someone a hug without worrying that I'm going to die as a consequence.
Right.
So I think that there's going to be a little bit of a tussle between profitability and personal fulfillment as we go forward.
It's going to be interesting, and this is a topic for that we're going to be talking about next week. It's going to be next week, Thursday of next week, we're doing a webinar about this topic, but about markets. And I think it's going to be, I'd love to hear from each of you as to what do you think this is going to affect, this is going to have on markets? Because of course, for me, I can't imagine not going to a market. You could talk about digital markets and virtual reality showrooms and all of that. to me, and I know Patty's like, I can't wait to hear how you go off on this, but it's like, for me, I cannot imagine going to market and not touching and not feeling it. A picture will never be enough, but maybe that's where I live, but my question is this: how do you think it's going to affect markets and the way we see trade shows? How do you think it's going to affect selling? Are we going to become more comfortable with buying things without seeing or touching them, or will that always be a part of things? What's coming in your opinion?
Well, if I could, I'll jump in first, and I agree with you. They have to continue. I don't think we're moving away from markets as a whole. I definitely believe that we were already moving in the direction, and I'd love to hear Michelle's thoughts on this as well, with regard to the idea that there were so many markets and they went on for so long. And I think that we may see a shift in the length of time that markets go on, and that we may see a shift to the number of markets that are out there, But I definitely believe that we need it. Especially in our industries, and even now more than ever with texture and tactility being top of mind. Those are trends that we do see moving more forward and not receding, that sense of engagement, because we are humans. We want that. The emotion is what is tied to any product that we want to get engaged to become engaged with, and to touch materials. Materials now are going to be calling to engage us. We're going to need that tactility. We want those velvets. We want those plush hands. We want those rough, raw, kind of almost handmade structures. We want those bonded and poofy and soft structures. There's all kinds of new materials that are coming to the fore that are fluffy and warming and comfortable and comforting. And I think you have to engage with those in order to really fully appreciate them. So yes, we've gotten kind of educated as to looking at things online and as a picture on any screen that we happen to be in front of. But I don't see that we're going to go completely away from having those engagements, and also just that shared community that happens at markets that you don't get with people, that are sitting in far corners of the world. So that would be my take on it. Michelle, what do you think?
Context is everything.
It's
absolutely. Hard to, when you're shopping for something on Amazon, you're looking for A, B, or C. But when you go to a market, the context of what you see and how you relate pieces to each other and how you envision your consumers being different from, and the feedback you get, but just by watching people. Somebody asked me, like, where do you go at market? And I'm like, I always follow the crowd. Like, I look to anywhere where there's a ton of people and I want to see what they're looking at, so you don't get that when you're just sort of, it's just who's the best sales pitch, so.
And also the brand, it's really the only time that the brand, in their showroom is the only time that they really can show you their thinking around what the product is, because then it gets picked and chosen and selected and placed in other types of with other types of products and created differently when it gets to retail or into someone's home. But this is the way that the brand can put forward their philosophies, their thinking, their ideas, who their DNA, what their DNA is.
Okay. Michelle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's never again going to be the same. And I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a yes and. And if I were a buyer, and I did sit in a buyer's chair at Target and at Room and Board for a number of years, if I were a buyer, I'd be mixing these two things, the virtual and the physical, in a completely different way. Probably more virtual as we recover from this, and then more personal as we go on. Because this whole thing about stay away from each other, this is so deep in our psyche now. This is not going away in a moment, a month, or a year. Mm-hmm. But I also think, for me personally, when you go to someone's stand at a trade show, they want to show you what's been the most popular thing. That's nice to know for me, but it's not the need to know. I want to find that one little obscure thing that only one other person cared about, because that could be the one directional thing that tells me not about this year and this season or even the one after that, but the one 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now. That's what I'm looking for. And I don't think anybody's going to put that together for me in a
so
virtual
what you're saying is that the virtual environment, you run the risk of being more a victim of the push than, it's what they want to push at you, rather than having the opportunity to explore and find something for yourself that is the next exciting thing.
It's already been edited, and I'd rather edit for myself. What about you, Leanne?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say, I think there's an energy that you would see at trade shows and markets that you can't get virtually. I do believe there'll be a balance. I think many of the things that are staples that you will be buying all the time, you will continue to buy that way. But I also think that, you know, I think probably for all of you, I know for me, kind of meandering the halls, meandering the aisles, you see things, you start connecting the dots. You have that context that I think is so critical. One of the things I always caution my clients and colleagues about is you can't pick one data point and assume that is the data point and that's the defining thing. You need to put it in place, in time, in you know, how it fits in the world as a whole. And that's really where you can develop your trends and your designs and your point of view. And I agree completely with what Patty said. It's like, as a former brand person, I used to work for General Mills. When we were able to bring all of our licensees together and showcase, this is what, you know, Betty Crocker stands for in the kitchen, and this is how she can help be your friend.
Right.
That's something that you can't replicate when it's a guy selling a pan.
Well, let me say
it's
something
very
else.
different.
A lot of the industries that you work with, food, for example, drug channel, they are in a rarefied, if not more threatening position right now because they've been allowed to keep their doors open. They have to. So are they using that to an advantage? Are they using it to solidify relationships with consumers? Are they like, what are they doing with that? Or are they just concentrating on getting to the end of the road with this? And, you know, I'm just trying to see, like, what of the people who are watching today, what can we learn from these people who are, you know, in this situation and dealing with it very differently from much of the rest of us?
I think they're doing both. I mean, you see people that are demonstrating care for their employees and care for their consumers by the way they're interacting, and even things like, I don't know if it's in all of your markets, but here the whole idea of we're going to open the stores for certain hours of a day for those people who are at high risk. Again, people don't forget that. I mean, it's in that whole thinking about someone else. Starts with the retailer and even the manufacturer, and then the content providing is the same thing. It's like, you know, don't just buy your meat, here's how you can prepare it. And I see that connection is something that they're doing well, and I think that connection is something that, you know, we can all take that to heart. And how do you in your business connect with your end consumer or your customer? In some case, if you're a manufacturer, your customer is the retailer. But how do you make their life easier? How do you provide a solution? And I think that people are doing a good job of that. There's certainly a lot of, I mean, last night I went to a store and there's still no toilet paper, still no Kleenex or tissue, there's still no whatever. But I know they're working hard. I believe they're working hard because they're showing me in other ways that they care about me and they're trying to get it done. So I just think being genuine, authentic, and putting your best foot forward or something.
Which actually, okay, so I'm going to say something now that it's going to sound corny, but what you're talking about is, you know, I mean, all three of you, and I want to thank you, like, before, I have one more question, but I want to thank you while it's in context. You all have donated so much of your time and so much of your care to just getting this together, offering to talk whenever we needed to talk, because you know that Springboard is committed to really pushing out information during this time for free. We've given away our trend reports and all of that, but I really want to thank you because you've made so much time to make this happen and to make future things happen. And you've been such amazing contributors to the Trend Share Project, which you can find out about on springboard.com, springboardfutures.com. But I wanted to thank you for that. So as a last question, before we start taking any questions that might be out there, I'm going to start with you, Michelle. If you had to give a piece of advice, I feel badly because I'm hitting you all with questions I didn't ask before, but screw it. If you had to give a piece of advice to retailers and manufacturers, what to think, what to be, what not to do right now, anything, you get it. What would you say to them? What's in the context of moving forward? Because this is about moving forward, okay? First, before anything else, what's the best way, in your opinion, to move forward? What piece of advice would you like to give?
Can I give 2 pieces of advice?
All
All right, I'll be fast. The first one is, in the near term, please avoid exclamation points. Nobody wants too much excitement right now. Just be comforting. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we have always talked about trend as its own entity. You have a core assortment, you have a trend assortment, and they talk to each other, but they're not the same thing. And they have different margin requirements. They have different roles in the store. We use different visual display for them. So my advice would be, as we move out of this, think about the role of trend. If you haven't already defined a percentage of your assortment that should be devoted to trend, or you might say risk, start thinking about that now, because that's what's going to drive consumers in. When they don't have to just buy the basics anymore, they're coming for the trend. So be sure that you have allocated a percentage of your assortment to that. If it's 15% of your assortment, think about nudging it up to 20. If you're at 25, you're probably at the peak of what you want, but focus on trend. The basics may take care of themselves for a little while.
Cool. Good message. Patty?
Same question. I like that, Michelle. That was especially point two, because one of the things that I've been thinking about is even what basic has been. There's going to be a shift in what we have called basic before, because I don't think as consumers we're going to have the same mindset. I think we're going to be in a less and more kind of conversation, but it's very different. I think we're going to want less and waste less and buy less and use less. But I think we're going to want more in a larger context. So things that offer us the ability to have community, things that bring comfort, things that bring connection. And so in looking at what those products will be, they will be about how they touch us in ways that have a longer lasting benefit. And those benefits, I think the shift in what those benefits we're looking for are going to happen. So fast fashion is not going to be the way that things are going to move forward. And fast fashion and when I say that, I don't just mean in clothing, I mean in any product category. It's that idea of looking for things that have longevity, that are creating, we're talking a great deal about updated classics, those things that are going to stay with us, that we'll layer onto, that we're not just going to get rid of. We're going to be very different, I think, when we emerge. Yesterday, we kind of had the beginning of the conversation about cocooning versus butterflying that happened after 9/11. And I'm thinking that we're in a very similar yet strongly different kind of place, sort of the yes and kind of place that you talked about, Michelle, whereas that was kind of something we chose to do in a different way. This has been forced upon us. And so how we emerge from this, I think, is going to be different, because we had this amount of time to care and to self-heal and to work within our family structures, our social structures, et cetera. And the way that we're going to emerge, I don't think it's fully formed yet, but I think that it's definitely going to be more mindful and about buying mindfully, purchasing mindfully in terms of when we go back out into the world.
Leanne?
Building on what, I agree 100% with what Patty and Michelle are saying. Building on that, I think one of the things that consumers are going to expect going forward is that their retailers and manufacturers will understand me and my concerns. So if, some of us can harken back to I'm going to say the good old days in quotes with, the regional department stores where they had assortments that were applicable to whether it was Indianapolis or Houston or, another market. And I think that we're going to see consumers looking for more things that are relevant to me or my location or my situation. The building on that whole personalization thing, striking a nice balance there. One example would be the Nike neighborhood store, where even though it's a nationally, globally known brand with stores all over the world, their neighborhood store in Melrose is curated by the local population to create meaningful assortments and drive sales. And I think consumers are going to be looking for that. I think the bar is being set in a great way, and I think it's up to us to rise to that challenge.
Do you think that retailers are going to be better? Maybe this is a big expectation, but do you think that a part of the successful retailer going forward is helping us do more with less? Helping us, because everything's going to be strained. Budgets are going to be strained, and it's not just about promotional periods anymore. I mean, do you feel like the bigger channels are going to be trying to help us, or that they should help us do more with less, as opposed to just selling things at lower prices or whatever? But treating us more holistically like people who are financially strapped, as opposed to the haves and the have-nots. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You know, that's a hard question.
Sorry.
it is. It's a big concept, but I agree with the direction in which you're taking, in which
Yeah.
you're taking it. I think they have to be. I don't think that we can move forward in the way that we have with business as usual. Usual has gone out, it's changed. And it hasn't just changed. The thing that's so interesting to me about this time is it hasn't just changed here. It's changed all over the world. Everybody is going through this, and we have not witnessed this before.
That's what we were talking about yesterday. And for my part, I think that one of the things that we can't miss is that this is a completely unique experience. It's not unique, actually, it's exactly the opposite. But we have never before had something that we all experienced together. I mean, even in a war, you have the people you have kids who experience war in a very different way than adults do, and a very different way than soldiers do, but this is a uniquely, and I use that word very deliberately, it is a uniquely unifying experience because we're all literally under the same roof. I mean, the fear, the anxiety, the stress, the claustrophobia, the hope, the looking forward. It's something that I've never in my lifetime, or I think in my parents' lifetime, did multiple generations experience a single thing the same way. And I think that it's part of our responsibility is to respond to that and to sort of foster and continue the unification that's caused. I mean, I think it's great. But it's a new way of talking to people because we're so used to segmenting. I mean, it's millennials are this and boomers are that, and I'm more guilty than anybody else. That's my expertise. But it's, I think it's very exciting. I think the other thing is just the home for me, I think about the home has been so many things. It's done so many transitions. And Patty, you and I talked about that. Leanne, you and I talked about that last night too. The home has been, the home is cocoon, and the home is, haven, and the home is the entrepreneur's home office, and the home is the genesis of, or rather the incarnation of everything we want to become. So for me, it's like the next phase is the home is shelter, as we were talking last night. I'll admit, I said the home is fortress, and Patty gave me the big beat down and said, this is like, no walls, so.
The fortress puts up something that I think is exactly what we don't want. I think this idea of
that's why I'm saying it. But the home is shelter. We're going to be figuring out how we can, if this happens again, how do we make sure that, that the home is sheltered, for all of us together. I'm really, okay, so I'm going to see if I can find out, okay, Kimberly McSparron raised her hand. I love Kim. We haven't spoken in years, but I'm going to let her talk and hope that she doesn't say anything nasty to any of us. So, Kim, you there?
I am.
Well, excellent. This is technology for me, so I apologize.
I'm so excited to be here. Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. I'm sorry my dog is barking in the background.
I lock mine too in the bedroom, so. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I should have done that. My question is, as a tabletop designer whose business has gone way down because of the millennials, because nobody wants decorative dinnerware or high-end flatware, or, I mean, everybody I worked for went into Chapter 11, basically. So I've been redefining myself and looking at doing more surface design or doing more things like commissions of paintings and stuff. But I think this is going to really dramatically change the impact on people's choice in dinnerware. And I wonder what you think about that.
I'm going to answer first real quickly, if you don't mind, because I have such a long history in tabletop. I think that I think modularity is going to become really important. I think people being allowed to buy, we've been pushing either place settings or 16-piece sets. People have been very uncomfortable with open stock because of the jeopardy that it puts them in terms of, in stock position and a lot of that. But I think we're going to be seeing more. There's a particular company that I just love. Oh, what's their name? They're doing modular dinnerware in rectangles, and it looks great for entertaining. And Patty, you and I were there. What's their names? It's driving me crazy.
Where were we?
We were in Paris, end of the aisle. But anyway, and Kim, I'll send you their name. But they had a lot of mix and match dinnerware. It was actually being done by Merci in Paris. It was a license from Merci to this company who is escaping me. But I think what the future for dinnerware, if you're looking to engage millennials, is to stop trying to sell them things they don't want and they don't need. Like a salad plate, salad is a meal to a millennial, so it can't be an 8-inch salad plate. Bowls have to be deeper, have to be friendlier to take to the couch. I met with some people from Walmart last year, and they're in a room of about 20 people. I said, how many of you have dinner with your family at the table? And the answer, one person raised their hand. And
Wow.
it's, we all eat in the living room. So why are we still pretending that people eat places they don't, and that kids don't take their dinner into their room? So I think honestly, Kim, it's about being realistic to me. And
Right.
I completely agree. And I'd like to emphasize the importance of bowls. You talked about a bowl has to be deeper. Does it? Maybe it has to be smaller. Maybe it has to be wider. Yes, the answer is yes to everything. Bowls, bowls, bowls. Open stack bowls, bowls by the set, doesn't matter. Just do them.
I would agree. In fact, if you think about all of the different kinds of meals that are top of the list now for millennials, they're all things that come in a bowl, so it's the rise of things like buffet and things that you eat in a bowl. So why would you not take advantage of that? But the other thing I will add to this, and it is a thought that I've had for a while, is certainly one of the things that happens, and especially if we sort of address what Leanne said earlier about entertaining at home, I think that there will be a call for interesting pieces that can do double duty or triple duty, that have the ability to nest and transform, and that you can utilize for different types of end uses. I think those kinds of things are going to be important. I look at somebody like Ibrid out of Paris, who did that first ball with the plates and the bowls, that created this wonderful sculptural piece when it wasn't in use, and how Rosenthal has now come out with several versions of it and high end. It's a really beautiful idea about how one focuses on things for tabletop. So I would agree that you're thinking out of the box. You're thinking about how are people really eating, and then those.
Patty, I've asked Joe Darachowski from NPD to speak at the next tabletop show with me and you. And one of the things we were going to talk about, Kimberly, was it's been so long since anybody spent any money or time on seeing how do people really eat now. We have no consumer information. We know everything about things that mean nothing, and yet we haven't explored the American eating experience in decades. And so we need data, we need information, so people like you can move forward and not have to pay $10,000 for a survey, but just give to the industry and say, if you want to move forward, this is what you need to know. How many people actually eat at the dinner table? How often? What pieces do they use most often? What pieces don't they have enough of? So that somebody can get out there like you and be bold and say, you know what, I'm going to do a 16-piece set and it's all bowls right down to the mug.
Right.
So you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see what we're dealing with now, and what kind of impact it has, because, excuse me, I know that many of the people I work with and deal with, they're actually celebrating having meals together with their family, sitting around the table, and I think it's a novelty, and it'll be really fun to see, how much of that. I agree that people we're nomads and we eat all around the house and we do all this kind of stuff, but I think there's just an interesting dynamic at play here that'll be fun to see how it plays out.
Do you think that people will be attracted to decorating dinnerware, or the whole trend of just doing all white or just very plain colors or matte glazes and not doing anything decorative, is decoration going to come back?
I just came back from Ambiente. Decoration is huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look,
Well, I'm glad you let me know that.
Well, but see, keep in mind, decoration is huge at every show because it's beautiful to look at. But over the years, and we've seen some gorgeous things come across over the years, and I'm just speaking from my experience, with Lifetime, which is Falstaff and Mikasa and all that, white is 80% of the business. It is because it's versatile. So what I would say is, build versatility. Everything that you do design wise is one more hurdle towards making things easily accessible. So all whites may be boring, but you can create great textural, like Patty was talking about, great textural advances inside of whites that have as much personality as something bold, but maybe it's a textural pattern and a mix and match that way. Because the thing is, we have to remember, we live in a rarefied position. The average consumer doesn't have in their DNA, and it's not an insult, they come to us because they want us to create solutions. They want us to create the foolproof. And as long as you can create a line that can mix and match easily and that people can't screw up, the closer you are to being successful, I think, so I'm
I
gonna
think you're,
tell everybody that.
I was just going to build on what you were saying, Tom, about the research, I think, and the generations, and because I do believe there are some differences if you think about not just generations, but life stage. I mean, my son is about to start his first apartment and, needs to know what to buy. And working with the National Confectionery Association, I know they've done some research, and startlingly enough, there are groups of people that are in the younger generations that don't love chocolate.
I know.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So thinking about those preferences with color and flavor and things like that, I'm sure they translate into dinnerware and things like that.
Thank you, Kale. Listen, we have to sort of wrap here. We have 2 more sessions coming up in the next week. One where we approach, we will have experts in from the trades, from trade journals and other editorial. Warren Schulberg will be there. I love Warren. He's always got an opinion. We'll have the major trades there talking about what the industry thinks, what they're hearing, ears to the ground all the time. We want to bring you exposed people. And people who really know what they're talking about. So I think we've done a good job of that today. And then the week after that is the markets are going to come and talk about how the markets are going to change and adapt to this. Thank you so much, all of you, for spending so much time with us today. It's just been a joy. And
Thank you.
Thanks. And we hopefully, if you like this, it'll be recorded, so you'll be able to pass it on. Come and visit us at springboardfutures.com. And there's a lot of free information, a lot of great blog posts. We're really excited, and that's become like a thing to say. We're definitely here for you. So if you need anything, give us a yell. And thank you to all the participants. I really appreciate your help. You've been wonderful.
Thanks.
Guys, good to see you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.